when 11-year-old Emma Chen confidently approached the massive M1A2 Abrams tank during Fort Carson's annual Family Day. Colonel Marcus Williams couldn't help but shake his head at the tiny girl who claimed she could diagnose the engine problem. That had frustrated his entire maintenance division for 2 weeks. Before we begin, leave a comment telling us which city you're watching from. And at the end, don't forget to rate this story from 0 to 10. Enjoy the story. Standing barely 4 feet tall, with grease-stained overalls that belonged to her older brother, Emma looked more like she was playing mechanic than offering genuine technical assistance. But when she pointed to specific components and began explaining fuel injection timing in terms that made seasoned engineers pause their conversations, Colonel Williams's dismissive expression shifted to something approaching curiosity about what expertise could possibly exist in such an unlikely package. The Colorado morning air carried the crisp bite of early autumn as yellow school buses rolled through the gates of Fort Carson, their engines creating a mechanical chorus against the backdrop of distant mountains. Emma Chen pressed her small nose against the cold window, watching the massive military vehicles grow larger as they approached the main vehicle maintenance facility. Around her, 28 other 6th graders from Pine Ridge Elementary chattered excitedly about the upcoming tour. But Emma remained focused on the industrial landscape ahead, her worn backpack containing a notebook filled with engine diagrams she had copied from her father's repair manuals. "Remember the rules, students," announced Mrs. Patricia Hawkins, their teacher, as she adjusted her glasses and surveyed her charges with the practiced eye of someone who had supervised dozens of field trips. "Stay with the group, keep your hands to yourselves, and remember that we are guests at an active military installation." The bus pulled to a stop beside Building 47, where Staff Sergeant Linda Rodriguez waited in her crisp uniform, her dark hair pulled back in regulation style despite the mountain wind. At 29, she commanded respect through knowledge rather than volume, her expertise in armored vehicle maintenance earning her recognition throughout the division. "Welcome to Fort Carson's Vehicle Maintenance Facility," Staff Sergeant Rodriguez announced as the children filed off the bus in an orderly line. "Today, you'll see how we maintain some of the most advanced military equipment in the world. The vehicles we work on here protect our soldiers and support missions around the globe." Emma hung toward the back of the group as her classmates clustered around the sergeant, their questions creating an excited buzz of young voices. "Can we see inside a tank?" asked Michael Torres. "How much do they weigh?" wondered Sarah Kim. "Do they really shoot missiles?" inquired Jake Patterson. "One question at a time," Staff Sergeant Rodriguez said with a patient smile. "We'll answer all of your questions during the tour. But first, let me introduce you to the stars of our facility." The massive hangar doors slid open with a grinding rumble, revealing a cavernous space filled with armored vehicles in various stages of maintenance. Fluorescent lights cast stark shadows across the concrete floor, where dozens of technicians worked beneath the hulking forms of tanks and armored personnel carriers. The air carried the familiar scents of diesel fuel, hydraulic fluid, and metal polish that Emma recognized from countless hours spent in her father's automotive repair shop. "This is where we maintain our M1A2 Abrams main battle tanks," Staff Sergeant Rodriguez explained, leading the group toward a gleaming gray behemoth positioned in the center of the bay. Each one weighs 68 tons and is powered by a 1,500 horsepower gas turbine engine. Maintaining these machines requires extensive training and specialized equipment. Emma's eyes widened as she studied the tank's massive form. Unlike her classmates who pointed excitedly at the gun barrel and armor plating, she found herself drawn to the engine access panels, the exhaust vents, and the complex array of cooling systems that kept the powerful turbine operating efficiently. The M1A2 can reach speeds of 45 miles per hour and has a range of 250 miles on a single tank of fuel. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez continued. It's equipped with advanced fire control systems, thermal imaging, and NBC protection systems that allow it to operate in the harshest environments. "Excuse me, Sergeant," a voice called from across the hangar. Master Sergeant James Parker approached from the far side of the facility, his weathered face showing the strain of someone dealing with persistent technical problems. At 42, he had earned his position through 2 decades of military service and possessed an encyclopedic knowledge of armored vehicle systems. "What's the status on Tank 7? Staff Sergeant Rodriguez asked, noting the concern in her supervisor's expression. Master Sergeant Parker glanced meaningfully toward a corner of the hangar where another M1A2 sat surrounded by diagnostic equipment and frustrated technicians. "Still down, Sergeant. The engine management system keeps throwing error codes that don't match any known failure patterns. We've been working on it for 2 weeks without progress." Emma followed his gaze to the troubled tank. Even from a distance, she could observe the tension in the mechanics' movements, the way they huddled over their computers with the intense focus of professionals facing an unsolvable puzzle. "How serious is the problem?" Staff Sergeant Rodriguez inquired, lowering her voice to avoid alarming the visiting students. "Serious enough that Colonel Williams has been asking daily progress reports," Master Sergeant Parker replied. "This is the second tank this month with similar symptoms. If we can't identify the root cause, we could be looking at fleet-wide readiness issues." Mrs. Hawkins moved closer to the conversation, her protective instincts activated by the adults' concerned tones. "Is there any safety risk to the children?" "None at all," Master Sergeant Parker assured her quickly. "The tank is completely shut down for diagnostic work. But Sergeant Rodriguez should know that the Colonel is scheduled to inspect our progress this afternoon, and he's not pleased with our lack of results." As if responding to the mention of his name, Colonel Marcus Williams emerged from the administrative offices, his presence immediately commanding attention throughout the hangar. At 51, he carried himself with the confident bearing of a career armor officer, his gray hair cropped in military precision and his uniform immaculate despite the industrial environment. 27 years of service had taught him to recognize both excellence and failure quickly. "Sergeant Rodriguez," he called, his voice carrying easily across the hangar floor. "I thought you were conducting an educational tour, not a technical briefing." "Yes, sir," Staff Sergeant Rodriguez replied, coming to attention. Master Sergeant Parker was updating me on the maintenance situation with Tank 7. Colonel Williams's gaze swept over the assembled children, noting their mixture of excitement and nervousness in the presence of such obvious authority. His eyes paused briefly on Emma, observing her intense focus on the disabled tank rather than the conversation around her. "And what exactly is the situation with Tank 7? The Colonel asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "Would be unsatisfactory." Master Sergeant Parker straightened unconsciously. "Sir, we continue to experience intermittent engine management failures. The diagnostic computers indicate fuel system irregularities, but all manual tests show normal operation." Asterisk continued to experience, Colonel Williams repeated, his voice carrying an edge that made several students step closer to their teacher. "Master Sergeant, we've had our best technicians on this problem for 14 days. Are you telling me that the United States Army cannot diagnose a fuel system problem in one of its primary combat vehicles?" "Sir, we've followed every troubleshooting protocol in the technical manual," Master Sergeant Parker said, his defensive tone carefully controlled. "We've replaced the fuel management computer, checked all sensor connections, even swapped the entire fuel injection assembly from a working tank. The system continues to show fault codes that don't correspond to any documented failure modes." Emma found herself drifting away from the main group, drawn by an inexplicable curiosity toward the problematic tank. The adults continued their discussion, but their voices became background noise as she studied the vehicle's configuration. Something about the diagnostic display screens, the pattern of error messages scrolling across the monitors, reminded her of problems she had observed in her father's shop. "The Pentagon wants answers," Colonel Williams continued, his frustration barely contained. "We have a multi-million-dollar weapon system that's been out of service for 2 weeks because our maintenance staff cannot identify a basic mechanical problem. We could request technical assistance from the manufacturer," Master Sergeant Parker suggested. "General Dynamics has specialists who might be able to provide additional insight, and admit that Fort Carson's maintenance division is incompetent." Colonel Williams's response carried no humor. "That's not an acceptable solution, Master Sergeant." Emma had reached the yellow safety tape that marked the perimeter around Tank 7. From this position, she could see clearly into the engine compartment where cables connected diagnostic equipment to various engine systems. Digital displays showed scrolling columns of numbers and error codes that meant nothing to her classmates, but somehow seemed familiar to her intuitive understanding. Specialist Maria Santos looked up from her diagnostic tablet as Emma approached the boundary line. At 24, she had earned her position through technical school excellence and possessed a genuine curiosity about mechanical systems that made her patient with questions from visitors. "Interested in tank maintenance?" Specialist Santos asked, noting Emma's intense focus on the engine compartment. "What's wrong with it?" Emma asked quietly, her eyes never leaving the diagnostic displays. "That's what we're trying to figure out," Specialist Santos replied, setting down her tablet. "The computer says there's a problem with the fuel management system, but everything tests fine when we check it manually." Emma pointed toward a cluster of sensors visible deep in the engine. "Bay, have you checked the fuel pressure sensors for calibration drift?" Specialist Santos blinked in surprise. "How do you know about fuel pressure sensors?" "My dad owns Chen's Auto Repair," Emma said simply. "He taught me about engine management systems. Sometimes the sensors read correctly, but they're calibrated for the wrong baseline conditions." Before Specialist Santos could respond, Mrs. Hawkins's voice cut through the hangar noise. "Emma, return to the group immediately. We don't wander off during educational tours." Emma reluctantly stepped back from the safety tape, but her mind remained focused on what she had observed. In that brief glimpse of the engine bay, she had noticed something that triggered a memory of her father explaining altitude compensation in fuel injection systems at their kitchen table. "I apologize for the interruption," Mrs. Hawkins said to Colonel Williams as Emma rejoined her classmates. "Children sometimes ask inappropriate questions," but Colonel Williams was studying Emma with newfound interest. "What did she say to Specialist Santos?" "I'm sure it was nothing significant, sir," Mrs. Hawkins replied quickly. "Emma tends to be curious about mechanical things." "Kind of mechanical things?" "Oh!" the colonel pressed. Specialist Santos approached the group, her expression thoughtful. "Sir, she asked about fuel pressure, sensor calibration drift." "That's not typical 11-year-old curiosity." Master Sergeant Parker laughed dismissively. "Colonel, surely you're not suggesting that a child could understand fuel injection systems that have stumped our certified technicians?" Colonel Williams's expression remained serious. "Master Sergeant, at this point, I'm willing to consider input from anyone who might have a fresh perspective. Our conventional approaches have failed for 2 weeks." Emma felt the weight of adult attention settling on her like a physical force. Her classmates had begun whispering among themselves, and she could hear the mixture of confusion and amazement in their voices. This was exactly the kind of attention she usually tried to avoid. "Emma," Colonel Williams said, his voice gentler than it had been with his subordinates, "what exactly did you observe about our tank's fuel system?" The hangar had grown quiet around them. Even the mechanics had paused in their work to listen. Emma felt her cheeks burning with embarrassment, but something in the colonel's tone encouraged honesty. The error codes looked like altitude compensation problems, she said quietly. "My dad always says that fuel injection systems need to be calibrated for local atmospheric conditions. If the sensors are set for sea level pressure, But you're operating at mountain altitude. The computer thinks something's wrong when everything is actually normal. Master Sergeant Parker's expression shifted from amusement to serious consideration. Colonel, that's actually theoretically possible. Our diagnostic software does reference standard atmospheric pressure, and we are at 6,000 feet elevation here. Specialist Santos was already accessing her diagnostic tablet. Sir, if she's correct about the altitude compensation issue, we could have the tank operational within hours instead of continuing to chase phantom problems. Colonel Williams stepped closer to Emma, his intimidating presence somehow less threatening than it had been moments before. Young lady, what did you say your name was? Chen, sir, she replied, unconsciously straightening her posture in imitation of the military bearing around her. Well, Emma Chen, Colonel Williams said slowly, you've just proposed a solution that our engineering staff overlooked. The question now is whether you're correct. Master Sergeant Parker was already moving toward the diagnostic equipment, his earlier skepticism replaced by urgent curiosity. If she's right about the altitude compensation, we could recalibrate the baseline parameters and have Tank 7 operational by this afternoon. And if she's wrong, Colonel Williams asked, then we're no worse off than we were this morning, Master Sergeant Parker replied, his fingers working quickly over the diagnostic console. But, sir, her analysis makes more sense than anything we've considered in 2 weeks. Emma watched the adults work with a mixture of excitement and terror. She had spoken up without thinking, driven by the same compulsion that made her correct her father's customers when they misdiagnosed their own vehicles. Now that same impulse had placed her at the center of a military maintenance crisis. Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell emerged from the tank's driver compartment, her youthful face reflecting the curiosity that had drawn her to armored vehicle operation. At 25, she represented a new generation of officers more interested in solving problems than maintaining rigid hierarchies. Sir, she called to Colonel Williams, the diagnostic readings are definitely showing pressure discrepancies that could be explained by altitude compensation errors. If the kid's right about the calibration issue, she continued, then caught the colonel's sharp look. Sorry if Emma's right about the calibration issue. That would explain why we've been getting error codes that don't match our troubleshooting procedures. Colonel Williams was quiet for a long moment, his gaze moving between Emma and the disabled tank. When he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of a decision that would change everything. Emma, he said slowly, I'm going to make you an offer. If you can diagnose this tank's problem correctly, if your analysis leads to a successful repair within 1 hour, I'll give you $10 million. The hangar erupted in gasps and excited whispers. Mrs. Hawkins stepped forward protectively, but Colonel Williams raised his hand for silence. However, he continued, if you're wrong, if this is just a lucky guess that wastes our time and resources, then you'll have learned an important lesson about the difference between confidence and competence. Emma felt the world spinning around. Her $10 million was more money than she could imagine, more than her family's auto repair shop would earn in decades. But the colonel's challenge carried implications far beyond monetary reward. This was about proving that practical knowledge could emerge from unexpected sources. That understanding didn't always require official credentials. Asterisk, sir, Staff Sergeant Rodriguez interjected. Are you certain this is appropriate? She's just a child. So was Alexander the Great when he solved the Gordian knot, Colonel Williams replied. Age doesn't disqualify insight, Sergeant. Experience has its value, but sometimes fresh eyes see what experienced ones miss. Emma looked at the assembled adults, then at her classmates who were staring at her with expressions ranging from amazement to envy. In that moment, she understood that this was about more than fixing a tank engine. This was about everything her father had taught her during those long evenings working on engines in their family shop. Everything her grandfather had shared about persistence and careful observation. Everything she had learned about trusting her instincts despite doubt from others. "I'll do it," she said, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. Colonel Williams smiled for the first time since entering the hangar. "Then let's see what you can do, Emma Chen." The weight of nearly 30 stairs pressed down on Emma as she followed Specialist Santos toward the diagnostic equipment. Her sneakers squeaked against the polished concrete, each step echoing in the sudden quiet that had fallen over the massive hangar. Behind her, she could hear Mrs. Hawkins whispering urgently into her cell phone, probably calling the school principal to report that one of her students had just accepted a $10 million military challenge. Master Sergeant Parker hunched over the main diagnostic console, his experienced fingers navigating through complex menus and system displays. Lines of technical data scrolled down multiple screens faster than Emma could follow. But she recognized the basic patterns from watching her father troubleshoot computerized engine systems at the auto shop. The baseline atmospheric pressure is currently set to 14.7 psi, Master Sergeant Parker said, more to himself than to the assembled crowd. "That's standard sea level reading." "What's the actual atmospheric pressure here at Fort Carson?" Emma asked, stepping closer to examine the diagnostic display. "About 11.8 psi at our elevation," Specialist Santos replied, checking her tablet. "We're 6,000 feet above sea level, so the air pressure is significantly lower than standard conditions." Emma nodded, pieces of the puzzle clicking together in her mind like a mechanical assembly she had been studying unconsciously. So every time the diagnostic system runs, it's comparing the fuel pressure readings to the wrong baseline. The computer thinks the fuel system is underperforming when it's actually working perfectly for the actual atmospheric conditions. Lieutenant Mitchell climbed down from the tank's turret, her helmet tucked under her arm. "That makes sense," she said, then noticed Colonel Williams's approving nod. The fuel injection system would be trying to compensate for what it thinks is low fuel pressure, but the pressure is actually normal for our altitude. 25 years of maintenance experience, Master Sergeant Parker said quietly, shaking his head as he began making adjustments to the calibration parameters. 25 years, and I missed something this fundamental. "Sometimes experience can be a limitation," Emma said, surprising herself with her boldness. "My grandfather always says that experts sometimes can't see simple solutions because they're looking for complex problems." Colonel Williams raised an eyebrow. "Your grandfather sounds like a wise man. What does he do?" Emma hesitated, uncertain how much to reveal about her family's background. "He's retired now. He used to work on aircraft engines during the Vietnam War. Army helicopter maintenance." The response didn't escape Colonel Williams's notice, but he chose not to pursue the family connection immediately. Instead, he checked his watch and announced, 52 minutes remaining. Across the hangar, Emma's classmates had gathered around Mrs. Hawkins, their excited whispers creating a constant background buzz. She caught fragments of their conversations. "Can you believe Emma is doing this? My parents are never going to believe it. She's going to be rich." Emma tried to block out their voices, focusing instead on the diagnostic display as Master Sergeant Parker completed the calibration adjustments. Numbers cascaded down the screen, and she found herself mentally tracking the calculations, checking the computer's work against the principles her father had taught her. "Recalibration complete," Master Sergeant Parker announced. "Running diagnostic cycle now." The hangar fell silent, except for the hum of electrical equipment and the distant sound of helicopters taking off from the airfield. Emma held her breath as the diagnostic program cycled through its checks, each system reporting its status in methodical succession. Fuel pressure sensors. Nominal, Master Sergeant Parker read from the screen. Flow rate monitors, ... nominal. Injection timing, ... nominal. He paused, his eyes widening as he continued reading. Engine management system integration. All systems nominal. No error codes detected. A cheer went up from the assembled technicians, but Colonel Williams raised his hand for quiet. One successful diagnostic doesn't prove the fix, Master Sergeant. We need to see if the system maintains stability under operational conditions. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez stepped forward, her expression mixing admiration with professional caution. Sir, are we really going to conduct engine tests based on an 11-year-old's diagnosis? We're going to conduct a controlled engine startup, Colonel Williams replied. The engine management system holds steady during the startup sequence, then we'll consider Emma's diagnosis validated. Emma felt a flutter of nervousness in her stomach. She had been confident about the calibration issue, but she had never considered what would happen if she was wrong about something else. Some secondary problem that her simple explanation couldn't address. Hey, Specialist Santos said quietly, appearing beside her. You doing okay? You look a little worried. What if I'm wrong about something else? Emma whispered. What if fixing the calibration just covers up a bigger problem? Specialist Santos smiled, her expression softening her professional demeanor. Then we'll figure it out. That's what we do. Here solve problems one step at a time. You've already done more than most people would even attempt. Master Sergeant Parker looked up from his console, his earlier skepticism replaced by genuine curiosity. Emma, can I ask you something? Where exactly did you learn about fuel injection calibration? This isn't the kind of knowledge most children pick up casually. Emma glanced toward her classmates, noting their expectant faces. My dad owns an auto repair shop. I've been helping him since I was 8 years old. He always let me watch when he worked on fuel injection problems. Auto repair, Master Sergeant Parker mused. But tank engines are significantly more complex than civilian vehicles. Dad always says that engines are engines, Emma replied. Same basic principles, just different scales and applications. A fuel injector works the same way, whether it's in a car or a tank. Lieutenant Mitchell laughed appreciatively. That's actually a pretty good way to think about it. We tend to overcomplicate things sometimes. Colonel Williams was studying Emma with increasing interest. Your father's business, how long has he been working on engine management systems? About 15 years, Emma answered. He specializes in computerized engine diagnostics. Before that, he worked at a dealership for 10 years, learning about electronic fuel injection. And your grandfather, the helicopter mechanic, did he teach your father about engines? Emma nodded. Grandpa Chen taught Dad everything about aircraft engines before Dad decided to focus on automotive work instead of military service. Colonel Williams was beginning to see a pattern of mechanical knowledge passed down through generations combined with practical experience that transcended formal education boundaries. Emma, Master Sergeant Parker called out. We're ready for the engine startup sequence. Would you like to explain what you expect to happen? Emma approached the diagnostic station, noting how the technicians stepped aside to give her access to the displays. If I'm right about the altitude compensation, the engine should start normally and run smoothly without any error codes. The fuel injection timing should be consistent, and the computer shouldn't try to make unnecessary adjustments. And if you're wrong, Colonel Williams asked, then the same error codes will appear, or maybe new ones if there's a different problem. That the calibration issue was masking, Emma replied honestly. Fair enough, Colonel Williams said. Master Sergeant initiates startup sequence. The massive turbine engine began its startup cycle with a rising whine that filled the hangar. Emma could feel the vibration through the concrete floor as the engine's compressor spun up to operational speed. Around her, technicians watched their displays with the focused intensity of professionals, whose careers depended on successful equipment operation. Startup sequence nominal, Master Sergeant Parker reported. Engine RPM rising normally, no warning indicators. Fuel pressure holding steady, Specialist Santos added, monitoring her tablet. No fluctuations or anomalies detected. The engine? Noise settled into a steady rumble as it reached idle power settings. Emma watched the diagnostic displays show consistent readings across all monitored systems. No error codes, no warning messages, just the steady operation of a properly functioning military engine. Idle power established, Lieutenant Mitchell announced from the tank commander's position. All systems showing green. Engine response is normal. Colonel Williams checked his watch. 41 minutes remaining. Master Sergeant, increase power to 25%. The engine's note deepened as power increased, but the diagnostic displays continued showing stable readings. Emma felt a growing sense of relief mixed with amazement. A simple explanation had not only solved the immediate problem, but had apparently unlocked performance capabilities that the tank hadn't demonstrated in weeks. Asterisk 25% power achieved. Master Sergeant Parker reported. All parameters within normal ranges. Actually, sir, these readings are better than our baseline performance specifications. Explain, Colonel Williams ordered. Master Sergeant Parker was studying multiple displays simultaneously. The fuel efficiency is higher than expected. Combustion temperatures are more consistent. And the engine management system is making precision adjustments that it couldn't perform when the calibration was incorrect. Emma understood what was happening. The computer was working with bad information, so it was making bad decisions about fuel delivery and timing. Now that it has accurate pressure readings, it can optimize performance the way it was designed. 2. Specialist Santos was recording performance data on her tablet. Sir, if these readings are accurate, this tank is now operating more efficiently than it has since it was delivered to our unit. How is that possible? Colonel Williams asked. Engine management systems are designed to continuously optimize performance, Emma explained, drawing on conversations with her father about modern automotive technology. But if the system thinks there's always something wrong, it runs in a protective mode that limits efficiency. Now that the sensors are properly calibrated, the computer can do its job correctly. Increase power to 50%, Colonel Williams commanded. The engine's roar increased, but the diagnostic displays continued showing optimal performance across all systems. Emma watched technicians recording data that exceeded their normal performance expectations. 50% power achieved and holding steady, Master Sergeant Parker announced. Sir, I've never seen this particular tank run this smoothly. The response characteristics are exceptional. Colonel Williams was beginning to understand the full implications of Emma's diagnosis. Master Sergeant, how long should we maintain this power level to validate system stability? Standard procedure. Calls for 15 minutes at operational power to confirm performance consistency. Master Sergeant Parker replied. Then we'll run the full test, Colonel Williams decided. Emma, it appears your analysis was not only correct, but more comprehensive than anyone anticipated. Emma felt tears of relief threatening at the corners of her eyes. For the first time in her life, her mechanical knowledge had not only been taken seriously, but had proven genuinely valuable to adults she respected. As the engine continued its steady operation, filling the hangar with the sound of properly functioning military equipment, Emma realized that she had accomplished something far more significant than diagnosing a mechanical problem. She had demonstrated that practical knowledge could emerge from unexpected sources, that understanding didn't require official credentials, and that sometimes the simplest explanations were the most accurate. 32 minutes remaining, Colonel Williams announced, his voice carrying a note of genuine amazement. Emma Chen, it appears you've earned yourself $10 million. The hangar erupted in applause from technicians and students alike. But Emma found herself thinking about what this moment meant beyond the money. She had proven that the lessons learned in her father's auto shop were applicable to million-dollar military equipment. She had shown that careful observation and systematic thinking could solve problems that had frustrated experienced professionals. But most importantly, She had learned that confidence backed by knowledge was a powerful combination. Even when that knowledge came from an 11-year-old girl from Pine Ridge Elementary. The engine test would continue for another half hour, but the outcome was no longer in doubt. Emma Chen had solved the mystery of Tank 7, and in doing so, had changed her life forever. The ride back to Pine Ridge Elementary in David Chen's weathered pickup truck was filled with an uncomfortable silence that seemed heavier than the mountain air pressing against the windows. Emma sat between her father and Mrs. Hawkins, watching the familiar landscape of pine forests and rocky outcroppings blur past while her mind struggled to process everything that had happened at Fort Carson. "Emma," her father finally said, as they turned onto Highway 24, his calloused hands gripping the steering wheel with unusual tension. "Are you sure you understand what happened back there?" Emma looked at her father, noting the mixture of pride and worry that creased his weathered face. At 41, David Chen had spent his entire adult life working with engines. First in the Army like his father, then at various dealerships before opening Chen's Auto Repair 15 years ago. His practical knowledge of mechanical systems was extensive. But navigating sudden wealth was entirely outside his experience. "I fixed their tank engine problem," Emma said quietly. The fuel injection system was calibrated wrong for the altitude. Mrs. Hawkins shifted uncomfortably in the passenger seat, her phone buzzing with calls from school district administrators, local officials, and reporters who had somehow already learned about the $10 million challenge. "Emma, your father has every right to be concerned. What happened today is going to change things for your family." "Change them how?" Emma asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. $10 million changes everything, David said quietly. "Where we live, how people treat us, what opportunities become available. It's more money than our family has ever imagined having." They passed the weathered sign welcoming visitors to Pine Ridge. Its population 4,200, and Emma felt a strange mixture of homecoming and displacement. This morning, she had been just another student from a working-class family. Tonight, she would be the wealthiest person in their small mountain town. "Dad, what if I don't want things to change?" she asked. David pulled into the gravel driveway of Chen's Auto Repair, the pickup's engine coughing as he turned off the ignition. Around them, the familiar landscape of their modest shop and attached apartment represented everything their family had built through hard work and determination. The building needed paint, the sign had a burnt-out letter, and the office window had been cracked for 6 months because they couldn't afford to replace it. "Want doesn't have much to do with it, sweetheart," David said gently. "When something this big happens, change comes whether you're ready or not." Emma could see her grandfather's workshop through the window of the apartment above the shop. At 74, Henry Chen maintained his independence with fierce pride, still tinkering with engine projects despite arthritis that made fine work increasingly difficult. The yellow glow from his workbench light suggested he was probably rebuilding another carburetor for a local farmer. "We need to talk to Grandpa," Emma said, her voice carrying new determination. "He needs to know what happened today." Mrs. Hawkins gathered her purse and briefcase, preparing to leave the family to their private conversations. "Emma, I'll need to meet with you and your father tomorrow morning to discuss how we're going to handle the media attention and the practical implications of what's happened." "What kind of practical implications?" David asked, his protective instincts immediately activated. "Educational opportunities for one thing," Mrs. Hawkins replied. "Emma is going to need academic challenges that Pine Ridge Elementary simply can't provide. There will also be legal considerations regarding the money, tax implications, and probably scholarship offers from universities across the country." Emma felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of decisions that lay ahead. "Can't things just stay the same?" "I'm afraid not, honey," Mrs. Hawkins said kindly. "But remember, you have choices now that you didn't have this morning. That's a gift, even if it doesn't feel like one right now." After Mrs. Hawkins drove away, Emma and David walked slowly toward the stairs leading to their apartment above the shop. Emma could see her grandfather through the kitchen window, preparing dinner with the same methodical care he brought to everything in his life. David knocked gently on the apartment door, which opened almost immediately to reveal Henry Chen's concerned face. Despite his 74 years, he carried himself with the alertness that came from decades of precision work. First as an Army helicopter mechanic in Vietnam, then as a civilian aircraft technician before retirement. "David, Emma," he said, stepping aside to let them enter. "I've been expecting you. Mrs. Patterson from the grocery store said she heard something on the radio about Emma and the Army base." The apartment's interior was small but meticulously organized, every surface clean and every tool in its proper place. Emma had always found comfort in her grandfather's space, where problems were approached with logical precision and solutions were built through careful analysis. "Dad," David began, then stopped, clearly uncertain how to proceed. "We need to talk about something important that happened today." Henry's pale blue eyes studied his son's face, then shifted to Emma, noting the mixture of excitement and confusion in her expression. "Sit down, both of you. I'll make some tea, Grandpa," Emma said as they settled around the small dining table. "I solved a problem with a tank engine at Fort Carson today. The colonel said he'd give me $10 million. If I could fix it." Henry's hands stilled on the tea kettle, and for a moment he seemed to age visibly. When he turned to face them, his expression carried the weight of memories from his own military service. $10 million, he repeated slowly. "And did you fix their tank?" Emma nodded. "It was a fuel injection calibration problem. The computer was using sea-level atmospheric pressure readings, but Fort Carson is at 6,000 feet elevation. The system thought there was something wrong when everything was actually normal." Henry was quiet for a long moment, his gaze focused on his weathered hands folded on the table. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of experience and hard-learned wisdom. "Emma, I need to tell you something about military equipment and the people who maintain it," he said. "In Vietnam, I worked on helicopter engines that cost more than most people's houses. The difference between a properly running engine and a broken one could mean the difference between soldiers coming home or not." David leaned forward, sensing that his father was about to share something important. "Dad, what are you trying to tell us?" "I'm trying to explain that what Emma accomplished today wasn't just impressive for an 11-year-old," Henry said. "It was the kind of insight that saves lives and prevents disasters. The military doesn't offer $10 million for party tricks." Emma felt a chill despite the warm apartment. "Grandpa, are you saying the tank problem was more serious than they told us?" Henry stood up and moved to a storage cabinet, withdrawing a manila envelope that appeared to contain decades-old documents. "Emma, I think it's time you understood something about our family's relationship with military engineering." He returned to the table and spread out several papers that appeared to be commendations, technical reports, and military service records. Emma studied the documents with curiosity, noting impressive letterheads and official seals. "These are from my service in Vietnam," Henry explained. "I received multiple commendations for innovations in helicopter engine maintenance that improved reliability and saved lives. But Emma, the principles I used weren't that different from what you applied today." David was examining the documents with obvious surprise. "Dad, you never told me about any of this. I knew you were a helicopter mechanic, but these papers make it sound like you were some kind of engineering specialist." "I didn't talk about it because I didn't want you boys to feel pressure to follow in my footsteps," Henry said. "Military service should be a choice, not an obligation. But Emma, what happened today suggests that you've inherited more than just mechanical curiosity." Emma was beginning to understand that her grandfather's quiet pride and systematic approach to problem-solving had roots deeper than she had realized. Grandpa, is that why you taught me to listen to engines? To understand how systems work together? Partly, Henry replied, but also because I recognized something in you that reminded me of myself at your age. The ability to see patterns that others miss, to understand complex systems through careful observation. David was studying his father with new understanding. Dad, are you saying that Emma's abilities aren't just coincidence? That there's some kind of family talent for this kind of work? Henry gathered the military documents and returned them to their envelope. I'm saying that mechanical intuition often runs in families, especially when it's nurtured through practical experience. Emma has been absorbing lessons about engines and systems since she was old enough to hold a wrench. Emma thought about all the hours she had spent in the shop, first just watching, then helping with simple tasks, gradually learning to diagnose problems by sound and feel, rather than just following diagnostic procedures. But Grandpa, she said, today felt different. I looked at that tank engine and somehow knew what was wrong. It wasn't like following a troubleshooting checklist. That's what we call mechanical intuition, Henry explained. It comes from understanding fundamental principles so well that you can apply them to new situations. The specific equipment changes, but the underlying physics remains the same. David was processing the implications of everything his father had shared. So when Emma diagnosed that altitude compensation problem, she wasn't just making a lucky guess, she was applying principles you taught her about fuel injection systems. Principles I learned maintaining aircraft engines in combat conditions, Henry confirmed. Where understanding atmospheric pressure effects could mean the receipts between a helicopter that flew and one that crashed. Emma felt a new sense of connection to her family's history, but also a growing understanding of the responsibility that came with her abilities. Grandpa, what should I do about the $10 million? What should I do about all the attention? Henry was quiet for a long moment, clearly weighing his words carefully. Emma, you have choices now that most people never get. But with those choices comes the responsibility to use them wisely. What does that mean practically? David asked. It means taking time to understand the implications before making major decisions, Henry replied. It means remembering that money is a tool, not a goal. And it means staying connected to the values and people that shaped who you are. Emma looked around the small apartment where 3 generations of her family had learned to approach problems with patience and systematic thinking. I don't want to move away from here. I don't want to lose this. You don't have to, Henry assured her. Emma, wealth can enhance your opportunities without requiring you to abandon your roots. The question is whether you can maintain your perspective while navigating circumstances you've never faced before. David stood up and moved to the window, looking out at the auto repair shop that represented his life's work. Dad, we're going to need guidance about how to handle this situation. Legal advice, financial planning, probably educational consultants. All of that will come, Henry agreed. But first, Emma needs to understand what she wants to accomplish with these new opportunities. Money without purpose becomes a burden, rather than a blessing. Emma considered her grandfather's words while watching the familiar evening routine of their small mountain town. Families gathering for dinner, children playing in yards, adults finishing their daily work. It was an ordinary scene in an extraordinary moment. I want to keep learning about engines and mechanical systems, she said finally. I want to help solve problems that matter. But I also want to stay connected to our family and our community. Henry smiled, his expression mixing pride with concern. Those are good goals, Emma. The challenge will be finding ways to pursue them while managing the attention and opportunities that come with sudden wealth. David returned to the table, his expression thoughtful. Dad, there's something else we need to discuss. Mrs. Hawkins mentioned that Emma will need educational opportunities that our local school can't provide. That's probably true, Henry admitted. But there are many ways to access advanced education without abandoning your community. Correspondence courses, visiting specialists, even gap year programs that let you explore different fields. Emma felt some of the anxiety she had been carrying begin to ease. So I don't have to choose between being smart and staying home. You never have to choose between developing your potential and maintaining your connections, Henry said firmly. The people who suggest otherwise usually have their own interests in mind rather than yours. The conversation was interrupted by the sound of vehicles pulling into the shop's parking area. Through the window, Emma could see news vans beginning to gather, their satellite dishes extending into the evening air. "It's starting," David said grimly. "The media attention Mrs. Hawkins warned us about." Henry moved to the window and studied the assembling reporters with the analytical gaze of someone accustomed to assessing potential threats. "Emma, tomorrow is going to be different from any day you've experienced before. Are you prepared for that?" Emma joined her grandfather at the window, watching camera crews position their equipment under the shop's parking lot lights. "I don't know how to be prepared for something like this." "Then we'll figure it out together," Henry said. "One step at a time, the same way we approach any complex problem." As the mountain evenings settled over Pine Ridge and the news crews settled in. For what appeared to be a long wait, Emma realized that her life had indeed changed forever. But standing in her grandfather's apartment, surrounded by the tools and wisdom of 3 generations, she felt anchored to something that $10 million couldn't alter. The money would bring opportunities and challenges she had never imagined. But it would also provide resources to pursue the mechanical understanding that had always fascinated her, while supporting the family and community that had nurtured her. Development tomorrow would bring new decisions and unfamiliar pressures. But tonight, she was still Emma Chen, granddaughter of Henry Chen, daughter of David Chen, living above an auto repair shop in Pine Ridge, Colorado, where engines were diagnosed by listening carefully and problems were solved through patient analysis. That $10 million would wait. The future would unfold according to choices she would make with her family's guidance and her own growing wisdom. But the fundamental principles that had led to this moment, curiosity, persistence, and respect for the elegance of mechanical systems, would remain constant regardless of how much her circumstances changed. 3 months after the tank engine challenge that changed everything, Emma Chen stood in the Pine Ridge Community Center, adjusting the microphone as she prepared for the interview that would mark the final chapter of her unexpected fame. The morning sun streamed through windows that overlooked the mountain landscape she had come to treasure even more deeply since learning she could choose to stay. Behind her, display boards showed photographs of her family's auto repair shop, her grandfather's military commendations, and the tank she had diagnosed at Fort Carson. Jennifer Walsh from Colorado Public Radio was testing her recording equipment with the careful attention of a journalist who understood she was documenting more than just a human interest story. After weeks of negotiation, Emma's family had agreed to one comprehensive interview that would satisfy media curiosity while allowing them to control their narrative. "Emma, are you ready for this?" Jennifer asked, noting the calm confidence that had replaced the nervous uncertainty of 3 months ago. Emma smoothed her simple green sweater, chosen carefully to represent her family's practical values rather than newfound wealth. "I think so. I've been thinking about what I want people to understand about what happened." David Chen sat on the front row of folding chairs arranged for community members who wanted to witness this moment. His work clothes had been replaced by his best shirt, but his weathered hands still carried the permanent stains of engine oil that marked him as a working mechanic. Beside him, Henry Chen held a folder containing the legal documents that had structured Emma's $10 million trust fund, ensuring the money would support her development without overwhelming her childhood. Judge Patricia Morrison occupied the chair beside Henry, her presence representing the legal protections that had shielded Emma from exploitation during the months following her Fort Carson achievement. At 58, she had overseen family court for 20 years. developing expertise in protecting minors who suddenly found themselves in extraordinary circumstances. Before we begin the formal interview, Jennifer said, "I want to acknowledge the remarkable restraint this family has shown in handling sudden wealth and national attention." Emma's story could have taken many different directions. Albert Richardson emerged from the community center's kitchen, carrying a thermos of coffee, his presence representing the local support that had helped the Chen family navigate unprecedented circumstances. Behind him came Pastor Williams, Principal Martinez, and Colonel Williams himself, who had driven from Fort Carson specifically to participate in Emma's final public statement. Jennifer began as the recording equipment activated. 3 months ago, you solved a problem that had stumped military engineers for weeks. But today, I'd like to talk about the choices you've made since then. Emma looked directly into the microphone, her voice steady and clear. "I learned that having money doesn't mean you have to change who you are. I learned that the best opportunities are the ones that help you grow while staying connected to the people and places that matter to you. Can you tell us about the path you chose after Colonel Williams's challenge? Instead of moving away or accepting consulting contracts, I decided to keep learning through practical experience in our community," Emma explained. "I continue working at my dad's shop 3 afternoons a week, learning real-world mechanical skills. I take advanced correspondence courses that challenge me academically. And I spend time with my family and friends because those relationships are just as important as any education." Jennifer nodded approvingly. "What would you say to other young people who might be facing pressure to make dramatic changes because of their abilities?" Emma considered the question carefully. "I'd tell them that they have more choices than adults might suggest. You don't have to choose between developing your talents and staying connected to your community. You don't have to accept every opportunity just because it sounds impressive. And you definitely don't have to let other people rush you into decisions that will affect your entire life." Colonel Williams stepped forward as Jennifer invited him to join the conversation. "Emma, from a military perspective, your diagnostic approach has influenced our training procedures. Can you explain how practical knowledge applies to complex systems?" "Systems are systems," Emma replied, echoing her father's teachings. "Whether it's a car engine or a tank engine, the basic principles are the same. Fuel needs air, compression needs timing, and computers need accurate information to make good decisions. The scale changes, but the physics doesn't." Jennifer shifted focus to the family dynamics. "Mr. Chen, how did your family handle the sudden wealth and attention?" David spoke with the quiet authority of someone who had learned to trust his instincts despite external pressures. "We took time to understand our options before making decisions. We consulted with legal experts, financial advisors, and educational specialists. But most importantly, we kept asking what would be best for Emma as a person, not just as someone with exceptional abilities." "What kind of legal protections did you put in place?" asked Judge Morrison. "The $10 million is held in a court-supervised trust that Emma cannot access until she turns 18, Judge Morrison explained. "This protects the funds from exploitation while providing resources for education and reasonable living expenses. Emma's choices remain her own, but she won't face the pressure of managing vast wealth as a child." Henry Chen was invited to discuss the family's engineering background. "Mr. Chen, we've learned that mechanical knowledge runs through several generations of your family. How did this influence Emma's development?" Henry straightened his shoulders, prepared to discuss his military service publicly for the first time in decades. "I served as a helicopter mechanic in Vietnam, where understanding engine systems meant the difference between missions succeeding or failing. I taught my son David those same principles, and he taught them to Emma. But what she accomplished at Fort Carson went beyond anything I taught her." "How so?" Jennifer pressed. "I taught her to listen, to observe, to think systematically about mechanical problems," Henry explained. but her ability to see patterns that others miss, to apply knowledge in new situations that comes from something deeper than training. Emma reached over to take her grandfather's hand. "Grandpa taught me that every engine has a story to tell, if you know how to listen. But he also taught me that knowledge is only valuable when you use it to help people." Colonel Williams addressed the broader implications of Emma's achievement. "This situation has changed how the military thinks about problem-solving and expertise. Sometimes the most valuable insights come from unexpected sources. What changes have you implemented?" Jennifer asked. "We now include practical diagnostic approaches in our training curricula," Colonel Williams replied. "We've also established procedures for evaluating unconventional solutions rather than dismissing them based on their source." Jennifer turned back to Emma. "Your story has inspired letters from hundreds of families across the country. What message do you hope they take from your experience?" "I hope they understand that being smart doesn't make you different from other people in the ways that matter," Emma said. "I hope they know that you can pursue your potential without abandoning your values or your community. And I hope they remember that the best achievements are the ones that help other people, not just yourself." The interview continued as Emma discussed the scholarship programs that had provided advanced learning materials, the mentorship relationships that had supported her development, and the careful balance between challenging herself academically while remaining emotionally grounded in her community. "Emma, let's talk about your plans for the future," Jennifer said. "I want to study mechanical engineering in college, probably focusing on automotive or aerospace systems," Emma replied. "But I want to do it here in Colorado, staying connected to my family and community. The trust fund will pay for the best education available, but I'll choose programs that fit who I am, not programs that other people think I should want." David nodded approvingly. Emma has learned that she can access world-class educational resources without sacrificing the relationships and values that shaped her. Distance learning, visiting experts, summer programs. There are many ways to get excellent training while maintaining stability. Judge Morrison addressed the legal framework protecting Emma's future. The trust structure ensures that Emma will have significant resources when she reaches adulthood, but also protects her from premature financial pressure. She can focus on learning and growing without worrying about managing wealth. What advice would you give to other families facing similar situations? Jennifer asked. "Take time," Henry said firmly. "Don't let anyone rush you into decisions based on fear or excitement. Consult with experts, but remember that you know your child better than any outside advisor. And never forget that developing exceptional abilities should enhance a child's life, not replace it." Emma stood up and walked to the display boards, showing her family's history. "I want people to understand that what happened at Fort Carson wasn't magic. It was the result of 3 generations of mechanical knowledge, combined with patient teaching and practical experience. Anyone can develop expertise if they have support and opportunity." Colonel Williams joined her at the displays. "Emma, the tank you diagnosed is now used as a training example for our maintenance staff. Your approach has improved our diagnostic procedures across multiple vehicle platforms. That makes me proud," Emma said simply. "But what makes me proudest is that I was able to help without changing who I am or abandoning the people who taught me." As the formal interview concluded, community members who had gathered to witness this moment approached Emma with congratulations and expressions of continuing support. The response wasn't celebrity worship, but rather the warm recognition of neighbors who appreciated her achievements while still seeing her as one of their own. Mrs. Patterson, the elementary school librarian, approached with obvious emotion. "Emma, you've shown our entire community that extraordinary things can happen right here in Pine Ridge. You've given our children permission to dream bigger while staying rooted in their values." Dr. Sarah Mitchell from Colorado State University had driven 3 hours to attend the interview. "Emma, I want you to know that our engineering program will welcome you whenever you're ready. But more importantly, your approach to balancing achievement with community connection has influenced how we think about supporting gifted students. Thank you, Emma replied. But I hope you understand that my education will be a partnership between many people and institutions. No single program can provide everything I need to develop both my abilities and my character. Albert Richardson joined the conversation, representing the practical wisdom that had helped Emma maintain perspective during months of unprecedented attention. Emma, what's the most important thing you've learned through all of this? Emma considered the question with the thoughtfulness that had become her trademark approach to important matters. I've learned that success isn't about how much money you make or how famous you become. It's about using your abilities to solve problems that matter while staying true to the people and principles that shaped you. Emma, Henry said as they paused outside the shop where 3 generations had learned to diagnose engines by sound and feel. How do you feel about closing this chapter of your story? I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, Emma replied, watching her father unlock the shop doors for the afternoon's work. Learning what I need to learn, helping solve problems that matter, staying connected to the people who matter most. David checked the appointment schedule, noting the familiar names of neighbors who had trusted Chen's auto repair with their vehicles for years. And your future, sweetheart? How do you see that developing? I'll keep learning, keep growing. Keep solving problems, Emma said. But I'll do it my way, at my pace, with my values guiding my decisions. They entered the shop where Emma had spent countless hours absorbing mechanical knowledge that had ultimately proven applicable to million-dollar military equipment. The smell of engine oil, the sound of compressed air, the organized chaos of tools and parts all represented the foundation that had made her achievement possible. Dad, Grandpa, Emma said as she tied on her work apron for the afternoon's projects. I want you to know that I don't measure success by money or recognition anymore. How do you measure it? Henry asked, hanging up his jacket and preparing to tackle the carburetor rebuild that awaited his attention. By whether I'm becoming the person I want to be while helping solve problems that matter, Emma replied. By whether I'm staying true to the values you taught me while still pursuing my potential. The afternoon brought the familiar rhythm of diagnostic work, customer consultations, and the quiet satisfaction of mechanical problems solved through patient analysis. Emma worked alongside her father and grandfather, her $10 million achievement taking its proper place as one accomplishment among many in a life dedicated to understanding how things work. Outside, Pine Ridge continued its daily routine. Children playing after school, adults finishing their work, families gathering for evening meals. It was an ordinary scene in an extraordinary place where an 11-year-old girl had learned that the most important achievement wasn't solving a military engineering problem worth $10 million. It was demonstrating that exceptional ability could coexist with ordinary values. That intellectual gifts were best developed within supportive communities, and that the true measure of success wasn't how much you achieved, but how much of yourself you preserved while achieving it, as the Colorado sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in familiar shades of orange and purple. Emma Chen opened her homework and began working on problems designed for 6th graders. Secure in the knowledge that her extraordinary gifts would continue developing at exactly the pace that honored both her potential and her humanity, the $10 million waited patiently in its trust fund, growing through conservative investments toward a future that would be shaped by Emma's choices rather than other people's expectations. And in a small auto repair shop in Pine Ridge, Colorado, 3 generations of the Chen family continued the quiet work of building a life based on love, wisdom, and the revolutionary idea that being exceptional didn't require abandoning the ordinary. Miracles of family, community, and home. 6 months later, Emma received a letter from the Pentagon thanking her for improvements to military diagnostic procedures that had been implemented across all service branches. The letter was signed by generals and engineers. But Emma's greatest pride came from a handwritten note at the bottom. Your grandfather would be proud. Keep listening to the engines. Colonel Williams. She folded the letter carefully and placed it in the drawer with her grandfather's Vietnam commendations. Understanding that both represented the same principles, that knowledge shared with humility could protect people. That expertise earned through patient work was more valuable than recognition, and that the best achievements were measured not by their financial value, but by their contribution to something larger than yourself. Emma Chen had fixed more than a tank engine that day at Fort Carson. She had demonstrated that wisdom could emerge from unexpected places, that communities could nurture exceptional individuals without exploiting them, and that the most profound success came from remaining true to your values while pursuing your highest potential. The story that began with a dismissed 11-year-old offering unsolicited mechanical advice had become a testament to the power of family knowledge, community support, and the courage to trust your instincts even when facing challenges far beyond your supposed expertise. Emma's future stretched ahead, filled with educational opportunities, technical challenges, and the possibility of contributing to innovations that would benefit countless people. But regardless of what she accomplished in universities or research laboratories, she would always carry forward the most important lessons learned in a small mountain auto shop. That knowledge was only valuable when it served others. That the best mechanics never stopped learning. And that staying connected to the people who shaped your character was more important than any achievement the world might offer. The end.